Singapore, world renowned for being a tiny country, being one of the cleanest places in the world, and for being home to crazy rich Asians. And while I found this to be mostly true in my short one-week trip there, these things and more also lend itself to making Singapore home to great fixed gear cycling. What's up? I'm Zach Gallardo. Life is short, but don't make it shorter. Be sure to ride your bike every day to be reasonably dangerous, even if it is just a short ride around the block. It'll make you feel better. And consider subscribing to watch more fixed gear videos just like this one. If you're wondering where I've been in the past few weeks, I was feeling burned out, so I took a short break to refresh myself, and then I got trapped in Malaysia for a little bit. Right now, Thailand is my home base where I'm living out of, but I have to make short trips out of the country if I want to stay for extended periods. On one such short trip, they denied me re-entry without a tourist visa, so I had to run around Kuala Lumpur and scramble for a tourist visa. Thankfully, I was able to get it and return to Thailand, hence we're back to our regular schedule. And shout out to Wabi Cycles for sponsoring the channel and making these fixed gear videos possible. If you want to learn more about the bike that I ride every day and as I travel throughout Asia, consider sticking around until the end of the video to learn more about them. Now, here are 10 perks of fixed gear cycling in Singapore. Singapore is a big city, but at the same time, it's a small country, which lends itself to having small town vibes. It's only 250 square miles, which is about 725 square kilometers, meaning that you can ride around the entire country in just one day. It's about 100 miles or 170 kilometers. It's a big city, small town vibes, meaning that you run into people that you know constantly. When I was riding around with the full-time bike messenger Luffy, it seemed just about every other block he was waving to people he knows, fellow messengers and motorbike couriers. And along the way, he was telling me stories about these people. Oh, that's Sean, he's my inspiration for being a messenger. That guy, he used to not like me because bike messengers and motorbike couriers don't get along, but he thought I was cool. And these small town vibes even extended to me. In my short one-week visit that I was there, I ran into somebody that I met there and knew out on the streets. And while I was out for a ride with another person and we were taking a break at a cafe, somebody recognized our bikes parked outside, came into the cafe, and recognized me and asked for an autograph. It was a pleasure to meet you, by the way, and on the off chance that you see me out in public, please do say hi. I would love to meet you. Although most of the locals that I talked to did say that Singapore could feel a bit too small at times, it does have its benefits in making you feel that you're plugged into a tight-knit community, even in a big city. And it is a big city. Pretty much the entirety of the country is dense, urban, or suburban, and it seems like the biggest open spaces that you'll find are industrial complexes. There's not so much in the way of riding your bike and escaping into nature, but on the upside, Singapore has some of the prettiest modern architecture that I've ever seen, which makes for great scenery while you're riding your fixed gear. Its denseness and its plethora of distracted drivers forces you to get good at riding in dense traffic and predicting drivers' intentions. Singapore is pretty flat. It's just dotted with some rolling hills, but I didn't encounter anything that I wasn't able to get up pretty easily on a fixed gear. And some of my favorite riding is city riding, and Singapore is perfect for just that. If you're more into measuring your stats and seeing how fast and how far you can go, there is one infamous stretch of road next to the airport, the coastal road. It sounds a lot more entertaining than it actually is, where the roadies like to go out and play. It's an uninterrupted 10-mile stretch where the only scenery are airplanes that are taking off and landing and light posts. It's only 10 miles, but in my experience, it feels probably twice that. But if you do want to tackle that, it'll definitely make you a mentally stronger rider. Singapore also consistently ranks top 10 in the world for safety. It's a small island, meaning if a thief wants to sell your bike, the people that they're selling to are probably going to recognize your bike, making bike thefts pretty rare. I've even heard stories of people having their bike stolen in Singapore and then being able to recover it pretty easily, which is something that is almost unheard of in a big country like the US. People leave some pretty nice and pricey builds unlocked and unattended if they're only going to be away from it for a short period of time. When I was hanging out with the locals, we would consistently just leave our bikes unlocked, even if it was 100 feet away. Just because we could see it, it's safe. We would also just leave our bikes unlocked and unattended if we were just running into 7-Eleven to grab a water, just because we'd be back in 5 or less minutes and nobody would do anything. It feels good being able to do that without having to carry around Fort Knox's worth of locks just to make sure that nobody steals my bike. And Singapore's safety makes it incredibly convenient to ride a bike. They have a saying in Singapore, they have 2 types of weather, hot and hotter. Being just a couple clicks north of the equator, Singapore is firmly a tropical climate. And if you want to enjoy yourself at least a little bit on the bike, you will quickly learn to just flat out ignore the weather and ignore your discomfort. Standards for nice weather were changed, and I actually found myself welcoming the rain just because it was so refreshing from the heat, sticky humidity. All of Singapore's rain also makes riding a brakeless fixed gear incredibly convenient and easy to maintain compared to other forms of bikes. And rain is one of the conditions that can quickly turn your smooth riding steed into a crunchy mess. It's the most reliable type of bike for an unwelcoming climate, and if you can learn to be a mentally tough rider and ignore the heat, humidity, and the rain, you can happily ride in Singapore all year round. Singapore is the cleanest city I've ever been to. That also means the roads are incredibly clean and well maintained. I didn't have to worry about pinch flats from unseen potholes and patchy roads. The roads were incredibly smooth and a treat to ride on, and the cleanliness meant that I didn't have to worry about dodging roadkill or worry about getting flats from straight nails, staples, or thorns, all of which are constant headaches riding in the US. To put Singapore's cleanliness into perspective, while I was out riding in the rain, the road started getting soapy. It didn't get sandy, it didn't get gritty, the road was foaming with soap. The majority of Singapore is populated by 3 ethnic groups: Chinese, Malaysian, and Indian. And these 3 ethnic groups combine to make amazing food. But there's plenty of restaurants and food courts that are opened well late into the night, and in my experience, most of them have been really delicious and really cheap. Excellent for refueling on your long rides, no matter where you are in Singapore. One thing that really surprised me was the sheer number of fixed gear riders in Singapore. And because there's so many in such a small area, you run into fixed gear riders all the time. There's even local hangout spots for fixed gear riders like MBS, the Marina Bay Sands, or the Red Bridge. And if you go to either of these spots on any evening, you're likely to find a handful or more of fixed gear riders. Singapore is also home to the Mega Mass Ride, where they consistently have 200 plus riders, most of which are fixed gear riders. And on the group ride and the meet and greet that I hosted in collaboration with the local Ascent bikes, where I pretty much just recorded an Instagram story and said, "Hey, I'm in Singapore, come ride with me, come hang out afterwards." About 50 fixed gear riders came out on a whim, with a sprinkling of some roadies here and there. Roadies are welcome too. It was really insane because I've hosted rides back home, and the biggest one, maybe 30 people came out, and that was awesome. But in Singapore, like 150 or 200 riders came out to introduce themselves and to hang out. It was my first time being treated like a celebrity. And while I like to think of myself as a pretty laid back and down-to-earth guy, not gonna lie, I liked being treated like a celebrity. I really liked that a lot of people came and asked me to sign their frame sets or their hats or their SPD shoes, and I love that a bunch of people asked me to give them on-the-spot Fixie points, even though there was just so many people that I just ended up giving everybody 69.420 Fixie points. The sheer number of fixed gear riders in such a small area was really surprising to me, and it made for one of the most memorable experiences of my life. All those riders in such a small area also means that there's a pretty sizable used market in Singapore. People are constantly posting fixed gears and components on their equivalent of Craigslist, and a hint of the peak fixed gear days where people were constantly swapping components to update their bikes just for the sake of updating their bikes is still alive and well in Singapore. And the fact that it's so small makes it easy to meet up and make deals happen. Seriously, a 1.5 hour train ride is considered far in Singapore. Compared for me back home, we would consistently drive 4 to 5 hours round trip just to check out bikes that we were interested in. Singapore is also home to a surprising amount of dedicated fixed gear shops. While I was there, I got to visit 3: Progression Bikes, Fishtail Cyclery, and Kodomori Bike Co., the last of which has the most extensive collection of rare and vintage track components that I've ever laid my eyes on. And on top of those shops, there's also the famous Cycle Project store that popularized fixed gear riding in Singapore. Whether you're looking for new or used components, you're likely going to be able to find what you're looking for in Singapore, as long as you're looking for a frame set that's not above 54 or 55 centimeters. I was told that 56, 58 and above are near impossible to find there. Not great news for you fellow tall folks. Otherwise, I hope you have a hefty wallet because, my gosh, Singapore's selection really tempted me while I was there. Keep in mind though, because fixed gear is so niche and Singapore is so small, you can only visit a lot of the fixed gear shops by appointment only. But that means that the shop can dedicate their time solely to you rather than having their attention spread across 10 different things at once like a lot of other shops. And continuing with Singapore's big city but small town vibes, it's also home to a very tight-knit fixed gear community. From what I've gathered, there's 3 types of fixed gear rider in Singapore. There's the goons, the kids, the teenagers that like to hang out at Marina Bay Sands and practice their tricks and hone their crafts. And then there's the messenger crew, the ones that have been riding full-time for years and years and are probably the hardest riders in Singapore. And then there's the OG fixed gear enthusiasts, the guys that I mostly hang out with. Despite having just met these guys, they treated me like an old friend. And it felt like they were old friends because we have the similar experience of having an enduring love, an almost irrational love for fixed gear riding. These guys were incredibly generous to me. Kai, the mechanic at Fishtail, lent me his Constantine decked out with Thompson, Envy, and Sugino components. And Roy, the owner of Fishtail, gave me the access code to his shop just so I could grab and drop off the loaner bike as I pleased, which is a lot of trust to give some guy from the internet. This right here is my favorite thing about fixed gear riding. With fixed gear riding, you either get it or you don't, and that's true no matter where you are in the world. And if you find other people that do get it, you're in to meet some really cool people. I just want to say thank you to QX from Ascent Bikes for helping me organize this trip and making these incredible memories happen. There's too many people to thank here, but shout out to Roy and Kai for helping me out as well. Shout out to Luffy, the messenger that helped me make this video, for just being a cool dude and being rad to hang out with. Speaking of rad to hang out with, shout out to Wabi Cycles for sponsoring the channel and making these videos possible. Wabi makes it easy for me to ride Wallace, my Wabi Special, as my only bike as I travel throughout Asia, since every one of Wabi's design choices are meticulously made to give the purest ride quality for the money. And Wabi executes those choices perfectly, handmade by master craftsmen in Taiwan and a friendly bike shop in Denver, Colorado that is eager to answer your questions and get you on a bike you'll love. Wabi's relentless attention to detail results in Wallace, my 58cm Wabi Special, weighing in at 17.5 pounds or 7.97 kilograms straight out of the box with no carbon components. That results in the best riding experience I've ever had with a snappy, lively ride quality that only top-tier steel can bring. If you're looking for a bike that could very well put an end to your search for the perfect bike, consider checking out Wabi Cycles linked at the top of the description, because it really is the closest thing that I've ridden to the perfect bike. Remember to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it so YouTube can know to recommend you more fixed gear videos just like this one, or give it a thumbs down in a comment so I can know how to make these videos better. And if you haven't ridden your bike yet today, stop watching me right now because life is short, but don't make it shorter. Be sure to ride your bike every day to be reasonably dangerous, even if it is just on the rollers or just around the block, because the weather may be cruddy where you are. And I guarantee you, if you ride your bike, you will feel better.